Well, hello there, and welcome to A Dog's Breakfast, a cooking show. Today, we're going to do corned beef and cabbage. Goes by many names: New England boiled dinner, sometimes just boiled dinner, but I prefer the corned beef and cabbage. It shows its Irish roots better. You'll find your corned beef, which is brisket on cattle. You'll find it in a package something like this at your local grocery store. Typically it's sealed up, and it also will have in it some pickling spice. You can use it or not. I prefer to use it. Of course, there's the cabbage, which I've halved the cabbage and then quartered the half. So I have 4 pieces of cabbage here. There's also potato. This is potato for enough for about 4 people. There's an onion that I'm going to put in with the corned beef when I cook it. There's carrots. I like to throw in snow peas. They give it a little bit of sweetness that I think is really, really good. And when the meal is ready, I'm going to top it off with some fresh parsley right here. So, you might say, corned beef. I didn't see any corn here on the ingredients. Well, you won't, because that's not the kind of corn that we're talking about. You see, about 300 years ago in the 1700s, there was a few things going on. First is that salt was very precious. So there was a salt tax in Europe. Except Ireland's salt tax was quite low, so they could get good quality salt for a decent price. Ireland also had a lot of cattle. Cattle were a little bit sacred, sort of like India today. So there's cattle running around, and they didn't get eaten very much. So they were sold to continental Europe. After a while, continental Europe put a ban on beef on the hoof coming from Ireland, because their farmers were getting what they thought was a raw deal. So those folks in Ireland thought about it and said, we have a lot of beef, let's cut it up and send it in pieces to Europe and to sailing ships and others who may need it. But they had to preserve it. Well, they had all of this great high quality salt. So they salted it to preserve it. You might say, where's the corn come in? Here's where the corn comes in. At the time, anything that was edible and very small, about the size of a piece of rock salt, was known as a corn, because that was about the size of a kernel of corn. You may wonder where the name peppercorn came from. That's where it came from. Okay? So, corned beef is really beef that has been salted with rock salt to preserve it. Now, I know you're going to ask, why did you cut that piece of beef in half? Don't you have a pot that's big enough for it? Well, actually I do. But today, we are sharing this meal with our neighbors. Our neighbors like to eat at 5 p.m. We like to eat closer to 8. So we're going to do 2 meals of corned beef. And the first one will go to our neighbors. Now, this corned beef will take somewhere between 2.5 and 3 hours to cook, and it's boiled. No fancy ovens for us. Top of the stove, we're going to boil it. Okay? You boil it until it's fork tender, which, as I say, is about 2.5 to 3 hours. The neighbors are lucky. They're going to get the fatty portion today. That's the part I love. I really, really enjoy corned beef, and I hope that you will after you try it as well. So let's go pop this in now. And about a half hour before it's done, so let's say at around 2:15 hours, we're going to put in the cabbage, potatoes, the carrots, and we'll wait a little bit longer to put in the snow peas. All right? So let's put in the corned beef now. The water is boiling. Now there's a lot of water in there, and there has to be a lot of water because you're going to put in all the rest of these. I'm going to put the onion in whole. It's peeled, but I'm going to put it in whole. And then later, I'll take it out, cool it, cut it up into chunks, and put it back in. What you'll find with the corned beef is that it's going to float. Okay? It's going to float to the top, and you might have to flip it over a couple of times. Now, I'm going to put in the pickling spices, because I really enjoy those. And when it comes our turn to put our chunk of corned beef in, I'll probably add a few peppercorns, or maybe some other pickling spices as well, just to imp up the flavor. Imp it up, bring it up. Okay? I'll see you in about 2.5 hours. Thanks for being with us today. So what you're looking for now in this pot that now has the water, the corned beef, the onion, and the pickling spice, is that for the first 10 or 15 minutes or so, you want a bit of a rolling boil. So you want it boiling fairly quick. After that, you want to turn it down, let it simmer for the next 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2 hours, 45 minutes, and let it get cooked all the way through. Welcome back to A Dog's Breakfast, a cooking show. Now, we've cooked the corned beef. It was in there for about 2 hours, 45 minutes. We did 15 minutes at a high boil, or a roiling boil if you want to call it that, and then at a simmer for another couple hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the corned beef out of the pot, and I'm going to put it here on the cutting board for us to cut up in a moment. And the knife I use is a serrated one, because this meat is very, very tender, and I don't want to tear it. But we're going to plate it now, and the first thing that I'm going to plate are the potatoes, because the potatoes are sort of the backbone of this. I know cabbage is very, very important. I love cabbage. I especially love it in this meal. But the potatoes are great. For the potatoes, normally I do not peel them. Okay? A lot of the nutrients in potatoes are very, very close to the skin or in the skin of the potatoes. You may wish to peel yours. I don't judge. It's up to you. But for me, no thank you. I will take mine with the skin on it. Now you'll notice that there's other things popping out here too, carrots and snow peas and so on. But I'm trying to save the cabbage, because what I like to do is bring out the cabbage just like this, lay it up against the potatoes. Don't worry about how much of the sauce you get in here, because the sauce is very, very good. Lay it up against the potatoes, and then I use that as a bit of a backdrop, if you will, for the meat. I know it's difficult for you to see because I have this darn pot in the way, but the kitchen's only so big and I only have one camera. It's what I can do. Now, bring out the rest of the veg, the snow peas, the carrots, and so on, and put them in there. And then we will get into cutting up the meat and slicing it. Slicing it very nicely. By the way, on the package, it actually said good for slicing. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure how else you would eat it, but just so everybody knows, corned beef is good for slicing. All right, come on out here, fellas. Come on out here. Great, here comes the rest of it now. Like trying to catch goldfish here. The carrots are the goldfish. Here we go. Back up there, you. Back up there, you. Okay. We've both got that taken care of. I'm going to put this back on the stove, and it's going to start to boil up again, because I have yet to put in the meat for our family. All right. You'll remember that this was quite a bit bigger when we put it in. It boils down quite a bit. I usually like, say a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch slice of this delicious meat, because that's where I find that I can actually cut it with a fork if I want to. And yes, you should be able to cut it with a fork. It is that tender. You'll notice here a little bit how the meat's tearing apart. If you didn't have a serrated knife, that would totally fall apart on you. So if you're going to cut it, I really recommend a serrated knife. And there we go. This is going to go on to 1. This is going to go on to 2. And I'll just save that for myself for a little bit later. And there you have it. It's corned beef and cabbage. Doesn't it look delicious? And that's It's a Dog's Breakfast, a cooking show. We'll see you next time.